going out to Tennessee. We're going to talk with apophatic. I'm probably saying that wrong. He, him, theist, wants to talk about God. Hey, tell me how to say your name correctly, and you're chatting with SR and Armin. What's up?
Yeah, so to say my name correctly, it's apophatic.
Apophatic. Yeah, I figured it was one of those. So yeah, perfect. What is up, man? How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. How about yourself?
Oh, pretty good. What you got for us today, man? Looks like a lot of big words.
Yeah, so I wanted to give an argument for God's existence.
Yeah, go for it. What you got, man?
So you've probably heard of the transcendental argument before, I'm assuming, right?
Huh?
You are in the atheist experience a lot.
Yeah, I'm familiar with it.
All right. Yeah, so this is the epistemological transcendental argument that I like to present. Basically reasoning to why God exists by retorsion. So I'll give you a syllogism if you want. I'll be fine.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah, go for it. We like syllogisms.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, so premise 1 is going to be that God is a necessary precondition for knowledge. Premise 2 is knowledge. We have knowledge. Conclusion, therefore God.
Yeah. I like I like that. I've heard it before. For sure. I always like to say this stuff, by the way, which is like, I don't have like a degree in philosophy, man. I go to J Mike a lot for sure to get some really good insight. Another person I really like, by the way, I just want to shout this guy out. Dr. Lance Bush, just has some really interesting thoughts on things. And I really have enjoyed listening to him over the years. I think on the rip, the first thing that comes to my mind is I have a problem with the first premise. I don't know how we would get solid justification for that, right? The first premise was like God is the foundation for knowledge, right? Like we can't have knowledge without God. Am I getting it pretty close?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, I think that is probably going to be the most objectionable in it. I mean, we could go down the route of like saying, hey, we just don't have knowledge whatsoever. Maybe that's productive, but I think that first premise is probably the more to sink our teeth in. But let me pass it to Armin real quick, apophatic.
I mean, I'm sure you have an answer ready for this because you guys usually, your precepts usually do. But obviously, one of the biggest problems is that you're trying to prove God and you're using the word God in your premises. So you are basically pre-assuming God. So that's not how you do logical arguments, right? You don't, the thing that is supposed to be in the conclusion exists in your premises. That's not how you form any argument.
Are you saying
how do you respond to that?
Valid? Are you saying the transcendental argument is not formally valid?
I'm not. Yeah, I'm saying there's a soundness issue. I'm fine with saying that it's valid, but Armin, if you want to go down that route.
I'm sure you have a response to it. I'm just wanting to see how you respond to it.
Yeah,
sure. Yeah, sure. So the transcendental argument is not necessarily begging the question. You're assuming that like we're just putting God in the premises, so we're assuming the conclusion. With transcendental arguments, especially if you look at Immanuel Kant, I don't think it's really assuming the conclusion. I don't believe that to be the case. It's an argument of retorsion, basically meaning that without like the necessary conditions for something, you wouldn't have something else. Like, for example, most precepts use the example of like a cake, right? If you have a cake, you're obviously going to have the ingredients. Without the ingredients, you can't have the cake. Simple as that. It's not that I assume the ingredients to be the case in the first premise. It's not begging the question, right?
You keep saying it's not begging the question, and you keep like saying, I don't think it is, but I don't hear why it's not. The actual thing that is supposed to be the whole point of the argument is right. It's right. You mention it. The first word that you mentioned on premise 1 it was God. It's not ingredients. It's the very thing you're trying to prove that exists.
Yeah, so I explained to you, I gave you an analogy of like a cake, right? So the ingredients of like flour, eggs, whatever, are necessary for a cake to be the case. We have a cake, therefore the ingredients exist as well. So it's just whatever necessary is something that is necessary for a certain object or anything in philosophy to exist like whatever is necessary for that.
But that doesn't work because you're not okay. If the point of the argument regarding the cake was right that it's necessary, like if you were trying to prove that the ingredients of the cake are real, right? Even then, if you say, well, we have cake, and for the cake, we have the ingredients need to be necessary. We don't even know in that situation. We don't even know if the ingredients are real. So you haven't shown. You assumed that the ingredients are real. You assumed that this cake is here because of this ingredient. Therefore, you just pre-assume the conclusion of that argument. You're using an analogy because a lot of people already knew that whatever goes into the cake does exist, but it doesn't apply to the argument that you're making here. You have to live in a world that we are not sure if cakes come from those specific ingredients, and we don't even know if those ingredients do exist for them to make that cake. We do know cake exists, but we cannot assume. So you actually have to make the argument that these cakes come from those ingredients and those ingredients exist, right? You actually have to show it to us. You haven't done anything. You just basically repeated a claim.
The reason why I told you that God is necessary precondition knowledge is because there's an argument for the first premise with a disjunct. But right now, with the transcendental argument, I mean, if you want to say that Immanuel Kant is flawed in his syllogisms and it's not formally valid, then you're going to have to give an.
I don't care about Kant. Okay, we're talking to you. Okay, you have made no arguments, right? You just made a claim and you act like you made an argument, but you haven't. You are saying that God is necessary for something. We haven't even shown that there is a God. Maybe that's level 2. Once you show us that there is a God, then show us what he's necessary for. But you haven't even began to make an argument. You just repeated the claim over and over and over again. And you use words that make it sound you're intelligent, but this is one of the dumbest arguments out there. Anybody that understands what you're saying, the only people that might think that you're saying something intelligent is because of the words that you use. But once we actually explain to people what you're saying, even the most idiotic, the most simple-minded people can see that you're not saying anything.
You're not. So my argument is the demonstration, right? So you're questioning me for assuming necessary components. That's like questioning someone for assuming the self to be able to make a proposition. That's nonsensical to raise that objection to.
I think we have arguments that do give us good reason, good justification to accept the self as a necessary precondition for things. I really do think that's going to be the place where we will find more fertile ground between us. Getting to the conclusion that is premise 1 in this argument, I think is deeply important. And I think that's kind of what Armin has been getting at, is that when we use this type of construction, when it comes to things like cake, nobody's really going to be up in arms about it because like, yeah, man, eggs are real, like milk is real, like, you know, we got all kinds of stuff that demonstrates that. So if the first premise is God is a necessary precondition to have knowledge, I'm really just interested in how do we get to that? What is the demonstration that is sound?
That's completely fine. So you were talking about soundness. Armin was more talking about the validity of like the formal validity of the argument. But sure, I can go into the soundness of it.
Yeah, let's hit it for a minute. We've got a bunch of calls, and so I don't know how much longer. So we've hit the validity side of it a bit. I think let's hit the soundness side for a few minutes and see if maybe we can get something.
Sure, no problem. Yeah, so the argument for the first premise is a disjunct, or what we call a disjunction in philosophy, which is it's like, for example, something's either true or false, right? So either knowledge.
I prefer true or not true, but.
Well, we would say that knowledge either justified autonomously or theonomously. Autonomous epistemology is without reference to necessity of God for the possibility of knowledge, and theonomous epistemology is reference to the necessity of God for the possibility of knowledge. Now, the reason that God is necessary is because autonomous epistemology is impossible.
Why? It seems like we're still kind of in the same boat.
Yeah, sure. So the reason that autonomous system, you want me to tell you why? I can answer.
Yeah, just real quick. We're gonna move off of this before too long because I
This is
feel
so
like
insane.
yeah, I know. This definitely is not Armin's favorite thing. It's very interesting for
This
me.
is so obviously stupid, but go on.
All right, go ahead, Christopher. I'll let Armin rip you to shreds here in a minute. I'm sorry. I'm
No,
just
no,
teasing
go
with
ahead.
you, brother.
Go ahead.
I'm just teasing with
Explain it to him.
you. Yeah, why is yeah? Go ahead. Sorry, I'll shut up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the reason why autonomous epistemology is impossible is because of this reason. So first principles such as the self, time, laws of logic, all of those are really necessary for knowledge, right? So, for example, you can't make a proposition without a person. So to make a statement, you have to assume the self for that to be the case. That's an example of a first principle. And since first principles are necessary for knowledge, now you can't justify first principles. Under autonomous epistemology, first principles can't be justified. So if first principles are necessary for knowledge and first principles aren't justified, the knowledge would be impossible under the atheist worldview.
What is knowledge? What is knowledge? Just short answer.
What is knowledge? Justify true belief.
Okay. So
What about
if
Gettier problems?
what if I told you, okay, we had no knowledge without any entities like humans that were observing things? You act like there is knowledge in the universe. You act like we had knowledge. I think this is a equivocation fallacy, because what you're doing is that you are what we are calling knowledge when we need a self to observe the world to create knowledge because of it. I think you're assigning that knowledge name to things that doesn't require humans or any other observing entity to be there to acquire that. So do you think like if humans were not around or there any other living beings that were observing the universe, do you think we would have knowledge? Do you think like let's say 5 seconds after the Big Bang, was any form of knowledge? Are you considering like any what we consider information, like any form of knowledge?
We're talking about my belief, the argument for my belief, because my belief is.
Are you when you're using the word knowledge? Do you think there was such a thing 5 seconds after the beginning after Big Bang in this universe?
Yeah. So we are assuming that knowledge is possible. Yes.
No, what I'm saying is that you're saying that to have knowledge, we need to have these entities like humans, so that could see things that come up with a belief, a justified belief, a justified true beliefs, right? But I'm saying that yes, we didn't have knowledge until we had humans, unless there's aliens or something out there. Let's assume there's not.
Well, I said that
we didn't have knowledge. So
necessary for knowledge. I said the self, not.
It doesn't.
I said the self.
Anything. Okay, self is an identity. Because there's a difference between self and the observer part of our. Self is referring to an identity that makes things a lot more complicated. I don't want to get into that. I'm just saying, without any form of observer, that some of them we could refer to them as self. Without any form of observer, we wouldn't have knowledge. You're assuming that we have a God, something that could be referred to as a self or anything that has an identity, because the universe comes with knowledge. I'm telling you, the universe doesn't come with knowledge. The universe didn't have knowledge for a very, very, very long time.
So we don't have knowledge. So knowledge is not possible?
No, I don't.
We have knowledge now.
Yeah, I don't think that's what he said.
Until we actually had until we had brains, now we have knowledge is possible. Knowledge was not possible for a very, very, very long time. So if you're assuming God because there's knowledge in the universe, there wasn't knowledge in the universe.
So either knowledge is possible or impossible. That's the true dichotomy. That's not, you can't have like, well, here's knowledge here, and then at this
knowledge, we have knowledge.
Yeah,
okay, there is no knowledge is possible. We have knowledge. I have a brain. You have a brain. Elliot has a brain, and what they're doing with this brain is that we're coming up with belief, and some of them are true and justified, which is based on your definition. That's what makes it knowledge. So based on that definition, yes, there is knowledge in the universe, so that makes it possible. I'm just saying this is not something that is within the fabric of the universe for you to be able to justify God because of it.
He's saying knowledge is not like some external entity that just exists in the world like, hydrogen, right? There's not just knowledge floating around out here that we can just grab every so often. That was really what his point was, I think.
I can
Knowledge is just a chemical. Knowledge is just a chemical reaction. Okay, not like we have something that photosynthesis. That is, that a very complicated form of chemical reaction. Forming beliefs is another very complicated biological chemical reaction that happens within human brains, and I don't know, maybe other entities somewhere in the universe, possibly. I don't know, right?
Okay, so yeah, that's a positive claim. That's great. We're having a worldview comparison. I'm asking you, how do you know that?
Yeah, so I do think I think
I have
whenever
beliefs.
I think whenever we step into a place where we're making claims on the other side of this argument, I have no problem supporting them and stuff. I don't know though that we've done enough when it comes to clarifying that first premise. I don't know that we've really gotten into that, and there could be a lot of reasons for that, man. We could. We do also have a lot of really other good calls that I would love to go to. And honestly, I'm absolutely willing to admit this is an argument that I need to personally dig further into. The problem I often experience when I get into this is it feels like we're doing quite a lot of backflips to get to something as simple as demonstrating the existence of something. And I guess one of the big things that always comes up to me in these moments is, why in the world is this necessary? It feels as if there is nothing else that falls into the category except for this God stuff, except for this spiritual stuff, except for this transcendental stuff. It feels as if everything else in the world that all three of us, no question, accept, it just doesn't require all of this work. And I don't understand why that is the case here. Again, I happy to say, hey man, I'm not as versed on this. I'm not as knowledgeable. Again, two of the people that I mentioned earlier, for instance, like Lance Bush and J Mike, I'm pretty confident I've heard both of them tear this stuff to shreds before in their free time and their off time. And so it's just interesting to me that you would have so many well-versed individuals who really don't give this the tag argument, don't really give it much time of day. Yeah, we've got some other really, really great calls, some other stuff that I think is going to be really fun to talk about. Some questions for Armin too. I always like to get those out there. But Apophatic, I really appreciate you, man. I appreciate you calling in. Before we let you go, if I think Armin has one more thing he wants to shout at you.
Yeah,
quick.
no, I just said something that was wrong. I was being speciest when I said, as far as we know, humans have justified true beliefs. It's not just the human brain. I should know this. I have dogs, and for example, my dog sometimes gets hungry, and they have the justified true belief that if I eat this, that will solve that problem. So there are other brains. It's not just the human brain that has knowledge. Like other animals have also knowledge as well.
Yeah, don't come after Armin's dogs. He will absolutely bite your head off. No, but seriously, Apophatic, thank you so much for calling in. I thought you were incredibly cordial. Man, this is dense stuff for sure, and I'd love to hash it out with you more. I know before too long I'll be back on with J Mike. Please call us in then. And get his thoughts on it too. Again, I just think we need a lot more when it comes to that first premise. But it would also be fun to dig into whether or not we have knowledge at all, because that is a fun discussion too. But thank you so much, man. I'm gonna let you go. It's always good to hear from people in Tennessee. That's my state, y'all. It's a good state. It's got its problems. It's got some nice stuff too, but it's got problems.